On today's show, what just happened? Latvia upsets Canada at the World Juniors. We'll talk about that in detail, and also a quick word on Sweden versus Slovakia on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash, QMJHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian High, USHL and Crossover Scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, oh my goodness, Latvia just beat Team Canada at the World Junior Championship in the group stage. We'll talk about what happened more in the second segment. We'll really focus on kind of the events of the game, and what occurred in that game in the first segment there. And then in the final segment, we'll have a quick word on Sweden versus Slovakia, because Axel Sandin Pellikka is just absolutely ridiculous, and it's really showing his chops at this tournament. Before we get to any of that, though, just remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started right away here with Canada-Latvia. So final score, 3-2 in the shootout for Latvia. Started off with an interesting kind of first period. Canada was kind of all over the place, and Latvia was really in it. They stuck around. It was 0-0 after the first period. They finally get a break with Jet Luchenko scoring unassisted in the second period there. But then Latvia crawled back into this one. Eriks Matejko scored a goal in order to make it 1-1, and the concerns started to settle in. People were like, is this actually going to happen? 1 minute later, Callum Ritchie scores off a cross-ice feed slapper through the netminder there to make it 2-1. And a tiny bit of a sigh of relief before 2 minutes later, Peteris Bulans on the power play scores with a bomb from the point on a screenshot on Jack Ivankovic to make it 2-2. And then in overtime, how do you take a too many men penalty at 3-on-3? Like, all you have to do is count to 3. Can you just like help me understand what happened there, Sebastian? Like what?
Somebody forgot their primary school lessons of counting up to number 3. I think it was confounding. I believe there were 5 players on the ice for at least a second and a half. It was really egregious. Even on the broadcast after the game, they were showing a fan reacting to the Jumbotron with his finger going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's going on? And that was the reaction, right? Like, you can't be taking that penalty in this game in overtime on this stage. And hey, it led to a shootout. They should probably still have won this game, but they didn't. It was a fantastic storyline for Latvia, and we have to talk about the goaltending, because Linards Feldbergs, this is the best game of the goaltender at this tournament I've watched in recent memory. Yep. And we've seen Adam Gajan go monster mode for like 2 consecutive tournaments in recent years.
Yep.
And yet this game, talk me through the performance. What stood out the most to you, and why was it the shootout of all parts of this game?
He stopped 8 consecutive Canada shooters. Like that's not an easy thing for a Latvian goaltender that most people have never heard of before to do. And this is really the tournament where this happens. You know, that this is why, in my opinion, the World Juniors is the best like sports tournament on earth, bar none, because the storylines are always absurd. Someone comes out of nowhere that you've never heard of and just stands on his head against a major country. It's all David versus Goliath in this tournament, and that's what makes it beautiful. So when I hear the arguments about shrinking this tournament and is it fun to watch Germany get curb stomped like 10-3 by USA, or and then things like this happen, which make the sport wonderful. It reminds me a lot of what we saw. I think it was Denis Godla, who played for Slovakia a couple of years ago and just stood on his head against major countries. Even through the losses, he was getting standing ovations from Canada's fans, and like they were cheering his name. Like, these storylines, this is where this happens. Goaltending is voodoo, and we've seen the epitome of that in this game for Linards Feldbergs. Like, this was a phenomenal performance for him. Was it 55 saves?
55 saves on 57 shots through regulation and OT, followed by 8 consecutive stops in the shootout. And I'm not sure if Canada missed a single of those shots. I think every single one of them hit the target. Maybe one of them was wide, but they required saving. And the composure, the aggressiveness as well from Feldbergs in the shootout. Fantastic stuff. He never got beat. I think especially it was Callum Ritchie's like first or second attempt where he went with his favorite move, the fake shot.
And he didn't bite.
Feldbergs did not bite for a second on it. There was not even a hesitation in continuing to track that puck going across the crease. And he made a very comfortable save at the end of it. Yeah. But that's a move that beat an NHL goaltender this year. But not Feldbergs.
Yep, absolutely. This kid is ridiculous. He was ridiculous in that game, and this is again why I love this tournament. You get these storylines that come out of nowhere. So I think this is the first time that Latvia has ever won a game in the group stage, if I'm not wrong, something like that. Like it's
at least it was the first time they've beaten Canada. That's already a big thing.
100%. And what a team to do that against.
And to do it in Canada's capital of all places. It's just packed full of symbolism.
And on top of that, Latvia is the youngest team in the tournament by 6 months. They have, on average, I think like the entire bottom half of their roster are return eligible.
I think they have 3 full forward lines that can return next year.
And I think they have 4 16-year-olds as well. Like this is a young team,
including their first line centerman, Oliver Murnieks. He's a 16-year-old playing the USHL, and he will be back for a long time.
Absolutely, he's going to be like this team is just starting as well, which is great news for Latvia. Now you can call this a fluke or whatever it is, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of this falls on Canada, and a lot of people are calling this an embarrassment and all that stuff. I wouldn't go that far. Latvia deserved this win. They worked hard for it, but at the same time, there were some clear issues on Canada's side. We'll really get into why this game kind of played out the way it did. But before I get into that, a quick word on Matthew Schaefer, who left the game in, I believe, the first period, or was it the second?
It was in the first. He only had 2 minutes of ice time before the injury.
So we just learned he broke his collarbone and he's out 2 to 3 months. Now this kid cannot catch a break. No. 2024 has been pretty much as awful a year as I've seen for any prospect ever.
And it was still a better year than 2023 was for him personally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, in the last year and a half, he's lost his split mom. He lost his biological mom.
Yeah.
Started the season this year with mono and now a broken collarbone. 2 to 3 months puts him in the range where he'll likely miss the rest of the regular season. We're talking about a probable return,
to it, at least.
Yeah, something like that. We're talking probably a potential return for the playoffs if Erie makes it. Might even miss the first round if we're talking about the later stage of 3 months. That's until early March. Now, in terms of his draft stock, I think Matt Schaefer did great for his draft stock at this tournament. He was the only bright spot on the blue line for Team Canada. He was phenomenal for them through his first game and a half there for Team Canada. Ridiculous in transition, both offensively and defensively, active, aggressive. He was basically everything people expected Sam Dickinson to be at this tournament. In comparison, Dickinson was very tame, very afraid of making mistakes, which is not Dickinson's game at all in London. But Matt Schaefer really took control of this team. Now, in terms of draft stock, do you think this is enough to push him into first overall consideration despite missing the next 3 months of action?
I think he's already in that consideration. Am I sure he's going to be the favorite with this injury? No, but he's definitely right there in the conversation. Between him and James Higgins, I think you have 2 really high-end front runners for that number 1 spot. I think Michael Misa is right there with him. Whether he's actually going to be there in NHL draft team talks, we'll see, but there's a lot of players that are right in that bunch. But despite the injury, Schaefer has to be there. He's the youngest player of this group at the top end of the draft. There's so much runway with him, and we still haven't really seen him fully healthy. Even in terms of mono recovery, players usually need 3, 4, 5 months to recover from it. He hasn't even had that since coming back from injury. And despite that, he's been among the most dynamic players in the entire OHL, barring the first week and a half after returning when he was a bit shaky. This is a really special player. And I really hope for him, personally, just as a human being, that he gets a little bit more luck moving forward, because it's been really rough to watch. And he's such a wonderful, wonderful player to watch on the ice. He's a real artist with the puck on his stick. I want to see him back on the ice and keep scouting him as soon as possible. And hopefully that happens before the playoffs arrive, so he can help Erie just cement their spot there. But
Yeah.
we will see. For the time being, it does mean that Canada has one more open slot now to bring another player. And what they do with that, I do think, is quite important, because if they choose wrongly, I think that their blue line could be missing some very important elements to making a deep run at this tournament.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that a little bit more in the next segment. But before we jump into that, where we'll be talking about Jack Ivankovic, a bit more about Linards Feldbergs as well as Canada's roster selection, among some other topics, we first have a quick message from our sponsors over at Rocket Money.
Have you ever found yourself wondering, where is all my money going every month? When it comes to subscriptions, they can stay hidden for a while. You might not realize you're paying for subscriptions you're not using anymore. And Rocket Money has made it so easy to track all of them down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and help lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best examples is a subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel service I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future, so no more stressing about budgeting every single month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. So just go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we have a bit more to talk about Team Canada. We want to really focus on what happened here in the second segment for Team Canada to lose this game against Latvia. I think the answer starts first in goal. I really want to emphasize the fact that Jack Ivankovic was not at fault in this game. He was great. He was really doing his job in net. And I think he was probably Canada's best player in this game. Would you agree?
Yes. Absolutely, I would. I mean, he made 7 consecutive saves in the shootout, or I think a couple of those actually didn't miss the target for Latvia, but he was so solid. He was consistent. He was poised, really well positioning. He was aggressive and challenging Latvian shooters. He wasn't trying to back into his own crease. Really, really solid performance for him. I don't think that either of Carter George or Carson Bjarnason would have done a better job than Ivankovic did in this game. The problem was that there were no goals scored, only 2 of them against Latvia on 57 shots. The expectation must have been to score at least 5 or 6 against this team, and they couldn't even get to a third of that level. It was quite the performance in that facet. There was a lot of pressure by Team Canada, a lot of bending and not breaking for Team Latvia, but they held strong. The defending was desperate. You saw defensemen and forwards alike jumping into shooting lanes, blocking shots, sacrificing their bodies for their team. And that desire, that dedication on every single shift made a difference in the end. The compete level was just suffocating for Canada, and I felt like there were long stretches where even just getting high danger scoring chances was a real struggle to create, and that was with a team with players like Gavin McKenna on it. Really, really impressive display for Team Latvia. But let's focus in on the roster itself, because both of us are of the belief that with some different players selected, this game may have looked very different. And let's start off on the blue line, because we preface this a little bit with that Matthew Schaefer discussion. There's a limitation in dynamic puck moving ability from the blue line on this roster. And Matthew Schaefer's spot is most likely going to be taken by Sawyer Minio, a Vancouver Canucks prospect who was in the running for this team up until the very end. And he's expected to join the ranks now over the likes of Zane Parekh and Carter Yakimchuk. So here we have another two-way defenseman, not the most dynamic with the puck on his stick, not going to be creating a bunch from the blue line. How is that going to impact Team Canada in, again, snubbing the high-end offensive defenseman?
I think this is like Dave Cameron's building a system that has a lot to do with dump-ins, retrievals, and deflected point shots. and yet he's kept home all of the best prospects, some of the best prospects in the world at those exact things. Zane Parekh, I can't name you a better defenseman at making his shots deflectable. Like, he's really, really good at shot placement and timing and weighing his shots in ways that make him really easy to deflect for his teammates. Why is he sitting home in a system that favors that? I don't know. The same goes for, on the opposite side, Andrew Gibson's on this roster. Gibson only knows to shoot to put pucks on net. He's not a player. He's not a defenseman that's able to shoot from the point in ways that make his shots deflectable. That's not his game. So he's playing top pair minutes for Team Canada. He's putting heavy shots on net that aren't really easy to deflect on a team that favors deflected shots. I don't get it. The same goes throughout this roster. I see a lot of safe selections. Tanner Molendyk and Andrew Gibson on that first pair. They work well together. They're both Nashville Predators prospects. One is a bit more dynamic with the puck. He's a better skater. The other one's a lot more safe defensively. But at the same time, neither one of them fits inside the structure. So when I look at this roster, like, the only one that makes sense for me is Sam Dickinson, but he's playing the complete opposite role of what he should be doing. He's a third pair defenseman. He's a third pair defenseman right now for Team Canada.
No power play.
No power play. Like, Oliver Bonk is on that top pair. Oliver Bonk only shoots to score. Sam Dickinson is really good at putting shots on net that are deflectable. If you're going to be playing that system on the power play, play your guys. Why is Tanner Howell on the first power play? I don't understand it. I love the kid. I love what he brings to the game. I've always been a big fan of his. You can attest to that. Like, I've been pushing for him hard. He's not a top power play guy. Porter Martone was benched. He was fully benched in the third period there for Team Canada. And who took his place?
Until being sent over the boards to take a shootout attempt cold.
Like, it just doesn't. And who replaced Porter Martone on that third line? Matthew Cataford.
Of course it was.
Who's another prospect who just doesn't fit in the system. Like, Michael Misa and Beckett Seneca are two of the best, like, retrievers and cycle creators in the OHL and in the prospects world. They're at home. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of these selections that just don't make sense. We already talked
Crystal in terms of actually having some high-end, like, dynamic playmaking on this roster.
Absolutely. Like, if Dave Cameron wants to build a cycle, like, dump and chase old school hockey system, I completely get that. Like, in that case, it makes sense to leave Crystal and Michael Hage at home because they're transition creators. They're finesse players. Like, I understand that. But why is Michael Misa at home? Why is Beckett Seneca at home? They bring so much of what Dave Cameron actually wants from this team. Meanwhile, Luca Pinelli's on the second line with Gavin McKenna. And again, I love the kid. I've been a big fan of his for a while. It's not working. Like, if you had Michael Misa in this roster, you could run a second line as improbable as it would be under Dave Cameron of Gavin McKenna, Michael Misa, Porter Martone. I think that would be a damaging second line, right? But instead, we're having all this. So it's just, I don't know how far we can take these conversations without, like, getting actually frustrated about it. But I think, to close things off, what's been the issue with the coaching here? Because, like, I didn't see many changes in that game against Latvia. I don't think Dave Cameron made many adjustments apart from benching Porter Martone. So what's your thoughts on that?
I have some thoughts on this. These are my thoughts on Dave Cameron for many years of having watched his teams play. I was based in Ottawa for 3 years and watched the 67s play forever. So I've had a really intimate knowledge of how Dave Cameron uses his bench, how he is in terms of in-game management. And for me, the biggest weakness of him as a coach has always been his stubbornness. He doubles down until it's too late in many cases. And sometimes that works for him. Sometimes things turn around and it really is quite vindicating. We saw that especially in the season where Ottawa went out and traded for Pavel Mintyukov at the deadline. And he just kind of kept the same system going and integrated higher end players into it. Logan Morrison as well, Seattle prospect. And it started working really well. That's not going to be the case here. We're not going to see big influxes of Michael Misa and Zane Parekh at this tournament anymore. That door is now closed. And I think that the stubbornness of the system, of the selection of the older players, much as Dave Cameron is saying that it has nothing to do with the birth certificates and when the players are born in terms of his usage of them, it's playing a big role. And I think that stubbornness in not adjusting anything, like, for instance, with this lineup, I don't know, maybe trying to give a little bit more responsibility to your dynamic puck carriers, alter your dump and chase system, especially when you're playing against the most hard-working team in the entire tournament with Latvia. You're not going to be able to outwork them on every single dump-in. You're going into not 50-50 battles. You're going into 45-55 battles. You're putting yourself at a disadvantage when you have the finesse that creates advantages in itself, and you're throwing the advantage away for those 50-50 battles, for that physical board play against a team that's better at it than you are.
I fully agree. We have to close off the second segment, unfortunately. One last word on that. There are so many players that could be here. Like even Grayson Souchin, we haven't even talked about. Like there's just so much like just talent left on off the table. But for our third segment, we want to focus on a very interesting game that occurred the day before the one against from Team Canada versus Latvia, Sweden versus Slovakia. Axel Sandin Pellikka has just come onto the scene, and Victor Eklund's looking really interesting along with some other guys. We'll talk about all that in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Alrighty, so for our final segment, we'll stray away from Canada versus Latvia and have a quick conversation about Sweden versus Slovakia, a game that occurred on the first day of action for the World Juniors at the group stage. Sweden beat Slovakia 5-2, and Axel Sandin Pellikka had a hat trick and an assist in that game. Just an absolutely ridiculous performance from Sweden in that game. And Slovakia was still in it. I mean, they were trying real hard. It's just Sandin Pellikka just took that game by the scruff of its neck and went, yeah, you're coming with me. So 3 goals, 1 assist. But I really want to focus on something really interesting that Sweden's doing in this tournament so far. They're playing 2 defensemen on the power play. With Tom Willander and Sandin Pellikka. It's very interesting, mainly because Sweden was one of the pioneers in terms of playing a 1 defenseman, 4 forward power play unit. So how's that been working out for Sandin Pellikka? He's basically channeling his inner Ovi here at this tournament, right?
He's launching pucks at the net, and I'm happy to see it. He has a fantastic shot. He's a better shot than at least half of the forwards on his team, probably closer to 3/4. Fantastic player, and so much deception as well that he's added to his shooting habits. There's so many fake passes integrated, look-offs, using his eyes and hips to deceive defenders, open up shooting lanes for himself, and the same vice versa for the passing. They're really symbiotic of how he's able to complement his goal scoring with the playmaking skill. And we also saw the chemistry between Axel Sandin Pellikka and Tom Willander on that top power play unit. I'd love to see how much Willander has been activating. I've never seen this player activating this frequently at any level of play in the past couple years. And he's a very like cerebral, good distributor, and he's getting the puck to Sandin Pellikka very consistently in spots where Sandin Pellikka is very excited to have the puck on his stick, which has been very fun to watch.
Absolutely. Those two have been very, very fun to watch on the power play, and that was a main reason why Sweden was so effective in that game against Slovakia. The special team unit for them was really phenomenal. And I find it really interesting as well that in that game, Eklund, I believe, started off on the 3rd line. And now in the game that they played just yesterday, he was playing on the 2nd line. So he's moving up the lineup slowly but surely. And I think that with Victor Eklund, what's really, really impressive is just his constant ability to just add another layer to his game. He's always been a very finesse-oriented, very slippery, elusive forward down low. But now it's the contact skills. It's the relentless hustle. This kid never, ever stops. The amount of energy he's been showing in this game is really the reason why Sweden's coaches are trusting him in with more and more responsibilities. He was on the top power play in the pre-tournament games, but it was a 4th liner. Now he's the 2nd line forward and still playing top power play minutes. And yeah, it's just absurd to watch this kid continue to just exceed expectations at every level. He played pretty much behind Anton Frondell at every level before this in terms of the pecking order. And when he joined this line, people are just like, okay, well, I guess Victor Eklund is a perfect fit for Anton Frondell. But now Anton Frondell was playing World Junior A Challenge minutes a couple weeks ago. He's not at this tournament, and Victor Eklund is in a top 6 capacity for a major country in this tournament, right? Like everything's going very, very well for Victor Eklund this season.
Absolutely. There's no complaints there from Victor Eklund's side with how things have been going. He's been scoring goals at Hockey Allsvenskan. He's been dominating shifts at Hockey Allsvenskan. And as he mentioned, he's playing a top 6 role now at the World Juniors as a draft eligible and on a good Sweden team. This isn't an easy year for a draft eligible to crack the top 6, as we see with Frondell not even being in the lineup to begin with. he's earned every single ounce of game time that he's gotten so far. And as you mentioned, just climbing up the ladder of the lineup, getting a bit more ice time every single game, doing increasingly more with every single game because he has more ice time, and then continues to earn more ice time with those minutes. It's a wonderful cycle for Eklund at the moment. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up on the top line by tournament's end, but in any capacity, he's already playing in the top 6 and showing just how versatile and adaptable he is on both sides of the puck. He's fantastic defensively as well. As you mentioned, the motor that never stops not only opens up so much for him in the offensive zone, it opens things up massively defensively as well, and he's constantly applying back pressure. You already saw Sweden get a couple really good counterattacking opportunities off of turnovers that he forced on the back check on unsuspecting Slovakians in that game. So much to like with this player, and I mean, we've been talking about him for ages. We will continue to talk about him for ages because there's so much to like with Victor Eklund. But let's shift our gaze a little bit to a player from each of these two teams. We have Dalibor Dvorsky and Otto Stenberg, both St. Louis Blues prospects, and both players I thought were very dynamic in this game. Stenberg, a really pacey puck-carrying forward with high-end handling skill, and then Dvorsky, who was just the leader on the ice for Slovakia. He scored the opening goal, 1-0. Ridiculous shot, but again, also effort level and intensity and physicality and defensive value. So much to like with both of these players, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially Dvorsky's really coming into his own in this tournament. He's really kind of taking control of this team and understanding what it's like to be a leader of a group like this. We've seen it from him before. I mean, he's worn a leather on his jersey at the World Juniors before. He's worn it at the U18 Worlds. Like, this is a prospect who has experience kind of leading a group, and this tournament's no exception. The release is still ridiculous. Half wall point shots all day from Dvorsky. Give me that every single day of the year. It's what he does really, really well. The effort level on the forecheck, on the back check, the energy he brings on every shift. Like, there's so much to like with Dvorsky. I think he's developing phenomenally here for Slovakia. And in Stenberg's case, I think it's really pointing to what we were talking about earlier with Canada. Like, sometimes you need these finesse puck carriers, even if your system is focused on forechecking pressure, hard forechecks, retrieval, cycle play. You need someone to be able to carry the puck in the offensive zone from time to time. And Stenberg brings that balance really well. He's still got the energy, he's still got the hustle, he's still got the defensive acumen, but he also brings that finesse game that you want to see from him. So hitting that sweet spot is really important. I think Sweden's done it wonderfully so far throughout the season. I think they're placing themselves in real contention for a top 2 medal spot. Especially if Team Canada keeps playing the way they are. But yeah, so far those two have been great. But I also want to talk about 2 defensemen for Sweden. Theo Lindstein was great in that game. Reliable, efficient. I've really liked the offensive growth from him as well. I think that was a main knock on his game for the longest time. No real deception or manipulation on breakouts. No real, power play ability. He was kind of limited in that sense as well. He was really kind of projecting as your bottom pair defensive defenseman at the NHL level. But since then, it's just been layer after layer of offensive additions to his game. He's gotten a lot better at creating out of his zone. Gotten a lot better at kind of fooling forecheckers into going one way before escaping the other. Just a very reliable, very versatile, very efficient offensive player, on top of just keeping that defensive stalwartness in this game. And speaking of which, where did Rasmus Bergqvist come from? Like, why? He's somehow playing top pair minutes with Axel Sandin Pellikka there. He's a 7th round overage selection from the Montreal Canadiens in the 2024 NHL draft. He was the before last prospect selected in that round. Now he's on the top pair with Sweden. What gives with this prospect?
And he scored Sweden's first goal of the game. Yeah, he's been fantastic so far. No, I mean, he came out of nowhere. I mean, I guess it's because he's a very subtle player. Nothing he does is overly flamboyant or super noteworthy in terms of elite level skill, elite physicality, game breaking checks and hits. That's not what he brings to the ice. He's smart, he's cerebral, he's well-positioned, he's very consistent. That's one of the reasons that you want him with Axel Sandin Pellikka. You want Pellikka to have a play that he can rely on where he just knows exactly where he's going to be. He knows that he can rely on that player to mop things up if his offensive risks backfire. And that's what Bergqvist is doing. He's a really nice complementary little piece to Axel Sandin Pellikka. And even though he's not bringing high-end dynamic skill to the equation, he's still finding pockets of space to exploit, because Sandin Pellikka is such a dynamic defenseman. That's how he scored his first goal of the game here, and Sweden's first goal of the tournament, was by just taking advantage of space created by a very dynamic player. And having a player that's both reliable but also opportunistic in that way is exactly what you're looking for in that role.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a great fit between the two. Reminds me a lot of the way that Devon Toews and Cale Makar work off each other in the NHL. But that's it for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, just remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the episode, and let us know what you think happened for Team Canada against Latvia. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, remember to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about everything going on in sports on YouTube's first 24/7 news channel. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we end off our coverage for December and head into January to keep covering the World Junior Championship. This has been Hattie Kalakesh with Sebastian High. Thank you for watching. Happy holidays, and we hope you tune in next time.